Okay, so welcome, Helen, to the Seeking Truth podcast. I appreciate you
Thank,
coming
thank,
on.
thank you for having me. Excited.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. Just to give a brief introduction for anyone that's watching, Helen is a spiritual teacher based in the UK, offering online as well as in-person satsangs, courses, and retreats. And my understanding is it's very traditional Advaita Vedanta style. If you want to check her out, please go to her website, which is helenhamilton.org. And is there anything in particular, Helen, that you would like to give a quick plug for that's coming up?
We have retreats this year in the US and in Spain, so in-person retreats. We also have a very large and growing community called the Graduate Program, which anyone can join. So it's a monthly subscription, but it's very, very cheap as we can keep it. So yeah, that's the main backbone of it all.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so to kick things off, actually what I wanted to do, if you're up for it, is do a bit of a self-inquiry exercise.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I've been fantastic. I've been with you in satsang a few times, and yeah, a couple of times you've invited students to do some self-inquiry with you, and I've done that a couple of times and found it really powerful. So yeah, I'd like to start there if we can, and just
Absolutely.
sort of see where it goes.
Start at the
Great.
end.
Start at the end, yeah, why not?
Wonderful. So, is there a particular question that you feel, a self-inquiry question that resonates with you?
Well, the one I use often when I'm sitting in meditation doing self-inquiry is what's aware.
Mhm.
But I've used various different iterations of it. So who am I, or who's aware, or yeah, lots of different styles of question, but the one I'm most familiar with is what's aware.
Let's go with that then. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's just ask that question together. What is aware? What's aware of this? We're hearing these words through ears and seeing through our eyes. And what's aware of that? What happens when you ask that question inside?
So I just kind of noticed that more of my attention drops back and I'm not as focused outside of me, but there's kind of like this area behind the head um, sort of comes alive in my experience.
And what's aware of that area behind the head? What's seeing that? Something knows that is happening, right?
Yeah, uh, it's kind of like awareness itself is seeing that.
Yeah. And when attention goes inwards to look at the awareness itself, it has an effect on the body, right? The body begins to feel more relaxed, more alive at the same time. But just being clear that those are the effects of seeing and not you yourself, the awareness. Because the awareness, if we look at it, it's not actually changing, is it?
No,
And is it awareness, is it able to go, to stop, to end?
no.
Beautiful. And where is it, that awareness?
Well, I can't find a boundary for it. So I would say everywhere, but it feels localized behind my head.
So is it a feeling awareness? Is it a feeling or something different? When we look just at the awareness itself.
No, it's not a feeling. It's different than that.
So there's awareness, and there's also an effect of noticing awareness is some kind of subtle energetic thing going on in and around the body. Yeah. And that's
Yes.
totally normal. That's how awareness is showing up as an individual, but not separate. All that makes you you in your individuality. And we can even use that sense of self to point us back to awareness, that which knows it. And you said awareness has no boundaries, it is everywhere. Is there anything that could cause it to stop existing, the awareness?
No.
And can you find any separate person? There's an individuality like a wave on the ocean surface, but can you find any separate being that is separate to that awareness?
No.
Beautiful. That means you're talking to yourself right now then, right? If it has no boundaries, that awareness is talking to itself, using these two bodies to understand itself, see itself clearer.
Yes, yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Is awareness suffering? Can it suffer?
No.
Beautiful. Can it ever be more aware or less aware?
My initial reaction to that is my experience is sometimes more aware or less aware, but it's not awareness itself that's doing that. It's the sense of me that's doing that.
Attention, when it goes to, we could say attention is a faculty of awareness. And when attention looks back at awareness, we feel more aware. And then when it looks at thoughts and phenomena, attention, we feel less aware, but it's not really awareness changing, is it?
No.
Wonderful. And does it need to wake up and recognize itself, even awareness?
No.
It just is, or there's an already so-ness about it. Can it ever be caught in illusion, awareness?
No.
Yeah. Just recognizing that there's always some part of us, the awareness, that is always free, always completely free. Could never not be. Coming back to that over and over again like this. And enjoying how it makes the body feel as well, right? There's peace, there's quietness, there's joy increasingly.
Yes.
Anything else you want to tell me about the awareness?
I appreciate what you just said about enjoying the feeling of resting in that awareness, because every time I experience this space, it is beautiful and it's very peaceful, restful. There's nothing to do, just like everything melts away, and the experience is very joyful. It's very nice.
And you can tell your body is a awareometer, right? When attention is on awareness, the body goes, oh yeah, like that. Attention is on thoughts and phenomena. The body goes, not so much. We don't like that.
Yeah.
We're just enjoying every time we look like this, we experience it deeper and clearer. Even though it's not changing, somehow we can see it deeper and deeper each time.
Yes.
And from awareness as awareness, everything just seems to unfold, to flow in our lives.
Yeah, I do notice that when I can operate from a place of let go in my life, things just seem to unfold and naturally take care of themselves. And there's a nice harmony and a flow to the experience of life. And when I'm contracted and in resistance, it's a very different experience. It's there's suffering in it, and there's wanting things to be different, and
So
yeah,
when is awareness contracted?
never. Awareness is never contracted.
Is it doing this in and out thing? Caught them free, then caught them free.
No.
Can you just notice that awareness is always watching, and sometimes it's watching a contracted body state, sometimes a really open and free. Nothing's really happening to you in that.
Yes.
So as an awakened being, you just watch. Sometimes attention goes to thoughts, body might tense up a bit. And then at some point, attention comes back to you, body relaxes. Nothing's really changing, is it? Nothing's really happening.
No.
Just kind of not being so concerned about when you seem to get caught again, when you seem to get stuck in thoughts. Just going, this isn't really my problem, actually, as awareness.
Mhm.
Just letting go of identification with this final bit of the moving and changing of it all. The attention, it's just happening, moving in front of you, isn't it?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that guidance. That's really nice. Kind of just want to rest here.
We can spend some time just sitting.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
So I want to ask some questions about your journey.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that'd be helpful for people that are watching.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about fear arising in your experience as you let go of the separate self. And it's kind of what you're pointing to, you know, with me in this moment. It's that identification with the separate self coming up again and again. And you're pointing to the possibility of seeing that awareness doesn't contract. Awareness is always free. And when I've heard you describe your experience, there was this intense fear that you went through as you sort of traversed that. letting go experience. So I wanted to ask you if you could just talk to that a little bit.
Fear was a pretty constant companion my whole life, but very much intensified the closer I got to what we were literally just talking about, that my mind, my separate sense of self, using those two terms synonymously, there was fear because there was a sense that I was going to have to change something over. I was going to have to stop being this version of me and start being a bigger version of me. And that brought a lot of fear because I felt like I was being asked to give up everything that makes me me. You know, that what I like, what I don't like, what I desire, what I dream of, all of that. And as I began to see, like we were doing in the inquiry, that that's not actually my problem. I get to be the awareness consciously, the infinite awareness. And at the same time, this individuality, like a wave on the ocean surface, of how that awareness is appearing. That wave, if you can imagine a wave that never recedes, it just gets bigger and bigger. It's still the ocean of awareness, made out of awareness, but an individuality that makes everything unique about each of us. That fear began to diminish when I realized it's, I'm going to say the word both the infinite awareness and the individual are what I always am. Sometimes I have a physical body and sometimes not. But the individual and the infinite awareness are the same. I don't have to lose anything in that. I don't have to let go of anything. I get to embrace my human existence then as and from the infinite awareness. And I realized nothing was it wasn't going to cost me anything to wake up. It felt like I was being asked to give up everything that makes me me, and that was terrifying, and I couldn't seem to find a way to do it. But as it got clearer, that wasn't really how it works. It's more like, okay, I thought this was me, and now I'm seeing it, this is me, but also this bigger, much bigger, well, infinite version of, you know. So you can't lose something that you never were. The only thing we lose is the idea that we are a separate being. That's the only thing that dies in the whole process. You've probably heard these stories about ego dying and this big death experience, and it really wasn't like that for me. That was terrifying, thinking I'd have to go through something like that. But in the end, it was just it's not one or the other. I am the individual, and I also am the infinite reality.
And was there anything that was a catalyst for that realization for you?
Fear. Lots of fear. Fear and jealousy and desperation. Just
Jealousy of what or who?
every other awakened being, well, every awakened being that had ever existed and somehow managed to break through that. And watching thousands and thousands of hours online of satsang, and jealous of every single person that seemed to be able to break through it somehow. It was, I'd like to say it was driven by devotion and bliss and all that stuff, but it was absolutely driven by, I have to get rid of this fear. I can't live in fear for another moment, you know, and jealousy and desperation, feeling like I would never actually be able to break through. It felt like exactly what we're talking about here. I got stuck there for, I don't know how long really in earthly, but it felt like forever. Maybe a year and a half, something like that. Trying to get up the courage to surrender my separate self or whatever it was, and failing every time, getting more desperate.
Yes. And what's your relationship with fear now? Does fear arise still for you from time to time, or does it just not come up?
I haven't felt any fear in a very long time. Sometimes there's a tension in the body in certain places, which are the remnants of some kind of contraction, and it's just gently loved, and experienced. It was really only embracing fear as the infinite
Mm,
awareness that allowed it to leave.
mm,
And that's not to say nothing comes up for me to look at. It's an ongoing thing, but it's not driven by
oh,
fear anymore. It's driven by curiosity and exploration and
yeah,
discovery.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And you mentioned surrender just then, and this trying to do surrender as an act. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've, you know, tried to surrender a lot in my journey as a seeker, and um, found it almost impossible. Uh, some success, but I think the success of attempting to surrender is um, more a coincidence
Side
than
effect,
me
yeah.
mastering side effect than me mastering any skill as such. And so that interpretation of, oh, I need to surrender in order to get to the other side of this, I think is a common one. And what did that how did that change for you over time? Like if you had this idea that you needed to surrender and then realized that yourself was just expanding to include the infinite and the
Mhm.
individual, how did that change?
That's a really good question. It kind of began to as I really embraced self-inquiry like we just did, and seeing that there isn't any entity that needs to surrender. And a
Mm.
non-existent entity can't surrender itself. It's just not possible. Although we keep trying for quite some time. I'm laughing now, but it really wasn't funny at the time. It was hellish,
Yeah.
and it became more like a two-sided coin, seeing what I am and seeing what I'm not. I'm not
Mhm.
this being that can surrender. I'm already the one that's free. I'm not this being that needs to surrender. And that finally deepened into um, the only thing I need to surrender really is the idea that I can surrender anything. I can't hold
Mhm.
on to anything or let go of anything as awareness. It's just how could you hold anything or let go of anything? It's
Mhm.
the deepest meaning of the word surrender. If you look at the etymology of it and the history of it, is to give back that which was never mine. From the French, I'm going to mispronounce, but rendre, to give back, and to give give away what was not original.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that
And
makes a
that
lot of
just kind of
sense.
changed. Instead of trying to destroy this non-existent entity, it kind of softened then into, it's only thoughts. The surrender is actually seeing what is not true. They're the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I appreciate the way you put that. Instead of trying to destroy this non-existent entity, because there can feel like a lot of times this kind of violence on the path. It's like I need to destroy the ego, I need to kill the ego, there needs to be some kind of death experience. And then there's this fighting internally of the
Mm.
part of me that um, is the survival mechanism and the part of me that wants to be free, and they're having an internal struggle.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard sometimes.
So seeing over and over again that there only was the infinite me, that whatever is here is really I don't know, condensation of the infinite into an apparent someone.
Mm, mm,
That there
mhm,
was really nothing there to lose or to give up. There was the only thing that undercut it, the suffering and the fear. And then
mm.
there's a falling in love with that which is here, the mind, the body, the individuality, because seeing what it's made out of, it is the infinite self awareness, whatever. It's made
Yes.
out of that, and there was a new relationship with myself, for want of a better word. But yeah.
Beautiful. So I'm interested in that, the falling in love with yourself and the new relationship with yourself, because it sounds to me like Well, I'm interpreting your words here, but it sounds like you're falling in love with every part of yourself. Would that be right?
Yeah, all the parts of myself that I had rejected, which were usually
Yes.
the separate sense of self, the mind, um, all the things about my body I didn't like, all the things
Yes.
about my mind I didn't like. So judging myself, judging others, all of that. There was a seeing of the judgmental thought even is the infinite awareness appearing as that. And from there it becomes, look at what I sculpted out of myself, this thought. We call it a thought, but I've made this beautiful thing. Same with the body,
Mm.
same with uh, a tea bag, same with a mountain, same with anything, even fear. Um, it's seen from what it's made from rather than the label we give it. And it's
Yes.
impossible to not fall madly in love with yourself then, when you see what
Mm.
even the tiniest cell of your body is made of. We love the truth so much, we love the awareness so much. How is that going to change your relationship with your body when you realize what it's made of on its
Mm.
deepest
Mm.
level? How's it going to
Mm.
change your relationship with your mind when you see what
Mm.
that's made of?
Mm.
It's,
Yeah, I can get a sense of that.
and there's a
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
curiosity that begins to arise then, right? A deep, wow, infinite exploration.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. What comes to mind for me as you talk about that? So I'm holding a couple of things at the moment. One is that you used to reject parts of yourself and then you fell in love with those parts. And then the other point you're making about once you see what those parts are made of, it's all awareness. It's all the infinite self. How could you not be in love with it? Um, the parts of myself that I reject uh, seem to come back to me again and again and present themselves and say, "Hey, I'm still here."
Yeah.
And what's been coming up for me recently is I have a 5-month-old baby son at home, and um, there is anger triggered in me from time to time with him in different experiences, different yeah, situations that happen, and the judgment that I have towards the anger that arises is that that shouldn't be there.
Mhm.
The relationship between a father and a son should be open and accepting and loving, and anger doesn't have a place in that dynamic. And it seems so justified that that is true. When I look at it, I can do work on it and I can see that it's not true at its core, but it keeps coming back as true in my mind. And sometimes I can relate to my son from a very deep place of witnessing, and there's just
Mhm.
space and there's just love and joy, and that's beautiful. But yeah, when I get caught, it's very quick. It's like hair trigger, or, split second between nothing happening and then being angry. So that process of falling in love with that particular part of myself, I'm having a rough time, I'll tell you.
This is where we can use a question. First of all, not judging yourself. There are always going to be things that are harder to accept, and especially when it comes to negative emotions, and especially when it comes to negative emotions in our children. That was the
Mm.
hardest part for me, having 4 kids, um, watching them from infants and then going through the teenage years, which you have to look forward to um,
Yeah.
sometimes. Uh, but they've been my greatest teachers, my children, because they have forced me to look at things that I would not look at otherwise. I would reject about myself. And
Mm.
in that there's as it comes back again and again and again, there's a willingness growing to actually look at it. The reason it keeps coming back is because somewhere inside ourselves we don't want to be the awareness of it. We want to
Mm.
be that which rejects it.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
infinite awareness kind of says, okay, right now there should be these two bodies, one of them small, one of them bigger, and anger. Like, are we going to argue with that?
Mm.
There's an acceptance
Mm.
there, and seeing everything from the awareness, there was a deep curiosity. Have I ever really experienced this without my judgment of it, my labeling of it?
Mhm.
Like, what
Mhm.
is anger actually if you feel it in your body without thinking about it? And actually, the first time I did that, it was quite surprising. There was just this fire in the belly, this real intense energy. Um, it seemed to want to move. It's like a dynamic energy, but it had never really been allowed to move because I was going, no, this is bad. This is anger. I shouldn't be feeling
Mhm.
this, you know?
Mhm.
So it quite quickly morphed into a powerful desire, a desire energy when I actually felt it, let it burn inside. I didn't,
Yeah.
most of us don't do that because we're afraid that if we actually feel it, we'll express it, project it outwards and hurt someone. But it's
Mhm.
really the opposite. If you feel it, it stays in here and then shifts in frequency and opens up.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I don't think I've ever just sat with it in the way you're describing. I think for the majority of my life, I've repressed it, and then more recent years, I've tried to allow myself permission to express it, not with people or at people, but
Mhm.
in other ways, dancing, punching something, going
Yeah.
for a drive and yelling to loud
Yeah.
music in my car,
Yep.
various
Done that
different
too.
things.
But have
Um,
we really met these? I mean, we've all got ideas that anger is bad. We've all been taught that it's bad. And we've experienced that idea. We've experienced that anger is volatile and unpredictable and harmful to other beings around us that we love. Have we ever actually experienced it, like without any ideas about it at all? If you can imagine
mm,
your son, like the very first time he experiences anger, he won't know what it is. He'll just
mm,
experience without the
yeah,
labels, without the capacity to say it's bad or unwanted.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this is why fear doesn't come anymore, because I decided, well, it relentlessly came and came and came until I decided I was going to meet it, actually experience it. And everything has to shift from there. It's like each negative emotion is really only an energy that we haven't really met yet inside.
Mm, mm,
And maybe
sure.
each one is on its own journey back to enlightenment too. It just wants to turn back into peace.
Yeah,
But we won't let it. We
yeah.
kind of like, you should go away. Right?
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. It's like keeping the energy body contracted and locked down and closed as opposed to opening and expanding and letting the energy body expand as well.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
what an awakened being has done consistently. If anything, they've just made a decision somewhere inside. I'm going to do my best to meet this.
mm,
Whatever this
mm,
is, it could be something outside, something inside. Um,
mm.
to meet it from awareness that doesn't have any judgment about it already.
Yes, yes. Yeah, beautiful. And when you described your relationship with fear, you said, I met it and met it and met it in awareness, and then it never came because it was met. Was that a similar process with anger? You allowed it inside of you, and anger doesn't come
Yeah.
for you anymore? Have you not experienced anger in a long time?
Sometimes it feels a little bit like anger, but it's again I recognized it's um it's when something wants to move. Suddenly there might be this upsurge of life force energy. Something wants to change. Something's about to manifest or happen.
Mm,
If I suppress that at all, which I really can't do these days at all, it would I might have described it as anger in the past. But if you
mm,
get in touch with anger, you see it wants to shift something, talking with my hands again, but you get the idea of it, right?
I do, yeah,
Wants to
yeah,
move. It's a very dynamic energy.
yes, yes, for sure. Yeah. And I can think of the things that anger was wanting to shift in me when it was arising. Like very
Mm.
clear examples come to mind of things that anger energy was wanting to control and manipulate in the environment. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it always it came down to me for me to a realization that whenever I'm feeling angry or anything, um, really I'm just feeling limited. I'm feeling like a limited being again. That was
yeah,
that all the negative emotions are a symptom of feeling limited and separate. And if
yes,
I could dissolve the division between me and the emotion, they became this one thing. And naturally, the emotion shifted in frequency. And I remember one
yeah.
time sitting with the fear and it literally turning into bliss, like just a
Mm,
deep embracing of it, meeting it, whatever that means to each of us, not knowing what it was, willing to experience it as if it was the first time I'd
mm,
felt it. And it just turned into bliss. And it was a
mm,
huge epiphany then. Like, I've been scared to meet these things. I didn't know how to be with them. I could only think about them. And when you
mm,
sort of really start to get that on a deeper level, there's a lightness then because you're not afraid of emotions coming up
mm,
and the
mhm.
intensity of them sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And and another thing that I've heard you describe about your journey is a sort of grief, uh, a river of tears. You would cry a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm curious about what were the stories that were happening for you while you were going through that experience, or yeah, what was that experience like for you?
There were two, the same river, but the first reason for the river of tears was desperation, absolute hopelessness, desperation, which I think, and jealousy, like I said before, realizing that there was something to realize, but not being able to find out what that was pretty much
Mm,
the worst place I was in my awakening. A lot of despair, um, begging and pleading and beseeching, any divine power, God, the self, please, get me out of this or show me what I need to see. But all of that was coming from a separate self, a apparent separate self that was trying to
mhm,
merge into God, trying to disappear, like we were saying at the beginning. How do I get rid of
mm,
myself and become you? Sounds like a noble
mm,
question, but ultimately is the cause of all suffering, isn't it?
mm,
So that was the stories behind the despair where there's just no way for me to break through. I was stuck there for about 7 years. Um,
mm,
Not that everyone else will have to stay there, but I didn't
sure.
know what I was stuck on. I knew there was something I wasn't seeing.
Mm,
And um, never going to get there. I'm going to be in the pits of hell for forever. It seemed timeless in not in a
mm,
good way. Um, just absolute desperation and a deep sadness and grief, an embarrassment for even still wanting to wake up to the truth because it so
mhm,
clearly wasn't going to happen at that point. I was so certain. So of course
mhm,
I kept experiencing that. And then
mm,
luckily somehow the infinite awareness is more powerful than all of that and broke through anyway. And this love affair with self-inquiry began, um, which is quite scary at first as well, recognizing I'm not who I thought I was.
mhm.
And that's very liberating in one way, but very terrifying in another way. All of my stories then were untrue. Even these really believed in ones, I'm never going to get there. I had to give those up.
Yeah,
It's nowhere to
yeah.
get to then. And this river then became joy, you know, tears, lots of tears of joy and self-recognition. And like this crazy day once where I was making a cup of tea, and I took the used tea bag out of the cup, put it in the little dish. I was just staring at this tea bag, and I was so in love with it. It was it
Mhm.
was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, because I'd never seen
Mm.
it before. So there's lots of tears
Mm.
and tears, you know. I could go through many moments like that, you know, just ordinary things the world would call mundane, and taking the rubbish out, the garbage out one day to the bin, and just looking at the contents of the bin, and it was like a sculpture. It was never going to look like that again.
Mhm.
You know, I was
Mhm.
standing there looking at my neighbors walking past the house going, you know, it's just said morning, and I stopped and looked, and I realized I probably looked very strange in that moment, right? Just staring at them. Anyway, the tears were from joy and feeling wonder and awe and excitement. You'll see it in your child, right? You'll see it in your
Yeah,
uh
yeah,
in his state. But just coming back to that consciously and not being able to
yeah,
lose it again.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so beautiful lying out in my backyard with my son on a picnic blanket, looking up at the sky, and there's trees that overhang, and he's looking at the leaves in awe and wonder, just ages just watching the leaves move in the breeze, and it's so amazing to him. And it's there's so many experiences like that that I get to live again for the first time through his eyes, and yeah,
You'll
appreciating this.
see him look at his own body too, like, what is this?
Yeah,
You know, when he
yeah.
can finally reach for something. And we've somehow lost that as adults. The awakened being lives there and kind of pretends to be an adult. We still got that adult wisdom, you know, don't cross the road without looking. All that stuff is still available, but um, the main state is just awe and curiosity. Like
Mm, mm.
literally everything you meet, every word you say, every being you interact with is like dancing with Shiva. You know,
Yeah,
it's like sitting with Christ. It's there's nothing ordinary, nothing mundane, nothing boring, nothing repetitive. It's all experience fresh. So
yeah,
for a little while, a lot of tears come for people as they start to really embrace that.
yes, yes. I'm curious about the way you described uh there's a certain part I've kind of lost exactly how you put it, but it was something like you were in the despair and you were there for 7 years, which is a long time. And then there was something beyond you that introduced you to self-inquiry, and then you fell in love with self-inquiry. And, I've heard lots of realized beings talk about um, being pulled towards the big S self, or, something guiding them, and things like that. And it feels, for me, in my journey, it feels like a lot of me trying to push from this side. But the way you describe it is almost like being pulled from the other side. So I'm curious in that tension, is that
Mhm.
accurate the way I'm describing it?
Yeah, and you realize they're both the same thing. So that
Right.
desperation, that push, push, push was actually the infinite self, the infinite awareness, beginning to realize, at least through this form, that way of trying to do it does not work. So there was
Hmm.
again, we're back to surrender. There was a letting go and opening up of. And the wonderful thing about desperation is, and hopelessness, if there is anything wonderful, it's eventually you can't even hope that you will break through in the future. Eventually that energy is completely gone. You cannot seek anymore some future moment. And it seems like for me that was the way I had to finally let go. Now, of course, I'm able to recognize it wasn't it didn't have to be forced like that, so to speak. That if we recognize
Yeah.
um who we really are, then that's going to automatically bring the surrender about. But There was definitely this shift over in the thought structure, which said,
Mm.
this way of doing it really obviously isn't working, and I wonder if
Mhm.
there's a better way or a different way. As right up until
Mm.
that point, that whole 7 years, I was sure that the way I was trying to do it was the right way and the only
Yes.
way,
Yeah.
as the seeker,
So-
as the, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've heard Adyashanti put it before. He said the purpose of spiritual practice is to exhaust the seeker. So
Yes.
like, the spiritual practice might not really necessarily get you to the place you're hoping it will, but there is a purpose in it, in that you get to that hopeless place and you realize you can't do it yourself. Do you see spiritual practice as having purpose in that way?
Yeah, seeing that that way doesn't work and seeing that the open way of exploration does work. That's what we're doing in
Right.
our inquiry and our contemplation and meditation. And at some point,
Yeah.
something inside goes, that's a lot nicer than this one. Let me kind of hang out here more. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean about the violence. What I was talking to you about the violence before.
Mhm.
It feels like, there's violence inside, and the relaxed open inquiry feels peaceful and loving. So yeah,
Yeah.
I do see that quite clearly. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And it was just
Um,
a falling away of my ability to push that was happening alongside my
mm,
somehow letting go that was just occurring from seeing
mm,
who I really am. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, beautiful. I wanted to ask you about the concept of shadow material, unconscious, you know, emotions, things that we push down. And in spiritual circles, there are from time to time spiritual teachers that uh, will claim realization, and then they'll manifest things that we would generally deem as society really unacceptable.
Mhm.
Sexual manipulation, financial manipulation, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And often it's shadow in them that they haven't worked through or they haven't seen, and because they haven't worked through it, it comes out in other ways. It comes out sideways, and it can be justified by them or whatever. So I'm interested in your understanding of the term shadow, and also in what you see as any shadow that's still in you.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, shadow would only indicate something that I haven't been willing to see fully. And
Mhm.
of course, there's the infinite seeing, the infinite seer. There's a process going on of always being open. There's an openness that always stays then as the awakening deepens, a willingness to see anything from other people doing things we wouldn't like, to shame or anything that needs to be seen, everything that needs to be seen. And it's sort of commitment, it's not the right word, but the best one I can find, to an infinite vigilance, for want of a better word, to meet anything that comes up, to be willing to see, to never again be able to be sure that I have seen everything, to an
Mhm.
open willingness to um, at any point in the rest of my human existence and beyond, something might trigger something inside, and there's immediately and automatically habitual now willingness to look at that.
Mm,
And
mm,
teach not necessarily awakened beings, but those that teach face a particular challenge. As any person who experiences success in the world, rock stars, famous artists, actors, actresses, even scientists, people, or anyone who reaches any kind of fame in the world, will have a lot of praise and love and devotion coming towards them from other beings who aren't really other, especially the self-realized being, because as they fall in love with themselves, it tends to be that people can really meet you and experience that
mm,
authenticity, and they like that. So
mhm,
for me, there's an ongoing commitment which took some it took a while to cultivate it as a habit that could not die, to always be vigilant for some kind of egoic fragment arising. When I first started to get lots of praise and all of that stuff, there was something inside going, "Oh, I've done a good job today," and
Yeah.
it was okay to enjoy it, but or you help someone through some inquiry, they have this amazing breakthrough. Something inside could take credit for that as a separate self,
Mm,
but the love of the truth is always the stabilizing thing there. There is no being here that just helped you through an inquiry there. I didn't do anything in that. I can't take claim
mm,
for it, credit for it.
mm,
Um,
mm,
the other side of that coin is I can't take credit for all my failures either. So mistakes
mm,
might happen, things that I'd rather not experience again, but no blame and an immediate looking at how could I do that better next time, you know, from so I think teachers especially have to be on their guard.
yes.
We've seen many, many examples of people falling from a high place and doing things that, um, acting in ways that aren't really fitting for that.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing commitment to constantly, um, that shadow is it could be anything, but especially when teaching, because there's ample opportunities if I wanted to start to form a separate self again. Um,
Hmm.
things like that. So it, it's not a hard work, though. It's not a vigilance as in I've got to really make sure this doesn't happen. Again, the root of the word, I'm a word nerd, you probably know. I love the etymology of words because of where they where they come
Right.
from. Often very revealing. And the root of vigilance is vigil, to hold vigil. And I think that's quite
Yeah.
beautiful from there. It's effortless from the infinite self.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that response. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it feels comforting when you talk about um, the watchfulness and the willing to look at anything,
Yeah,
because I can rest in that. If you have that looking at anything that comes up in you, there's a trust that can flow. And I think you are right when you talk about teachers have it particularly difficult. I think teachers get all kinds of projections, good and bad, that are not necessarily
right.
accurate or true. And um, so, it can be a difficult position to be in. But if there's that looking, even if most of it, 99% of it's not accurate, the good stuff, like the praise and the you're so amazing, and the bad stuff, you're so flawed and faulty,
Yeah.
if there's the willingness to look at it, it's all part of the exchange, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is my own awakening, deepening as all that stuff comes at me, the good and the downright ugly. I've had both.
Mm,
And the willingness to live as the truth will always prompt us to look at something. So if somebody was to say something that would have been very hurtful, or you're a fake, a fraud, um, there'd be a willingness to look at that. Am I hiding from myself? Am I being inauthentic in myself somewhere?
mhm.
There'd be no emotional response before that would have been excruciatingly painful. But there's oh
Yes.
really? Let me actually look at that. Um,
Yes.
and when you receive praise, it's a recognition also that person is perhaps projecting that onto this body because they can't really accept it about their own self, or
Yeah. Yeah.
they can't love themselves as much as they would like to, or it hasn't really hit them that they're talking to their self.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's an important point, is because a lot of the time, for me, even, I can disown the parts of me that are really beautiful and profound and, nice. And I want to put them out there because it's hard for me to acknowledge them inside myself. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think
I
for
do
for
feel,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going
No,
to
you go.
say, for me also the teaching, I had to really examine my motivations for doing it. and always be willing
Yeah.
to re-examine them. So this conversation now, for me, it's happening for no other reason than it seems to want to happen, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like there's no motivation behind it. Every satsang, every retreat we do, it's it's just what seems to happen, and I really enjoy it while it's happening. It's not like to help anyone wake
Mm.
up. If I
Yes.
get into that, I can help you wake up, then there's a separation, and it all falls.
Mm. Mm.
So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One of the things I appreciated about one of the teachers I had through the years was when he would get praised by one of his students, they would say, I'm so grateful to you for what you've done for me. He would take that gratitude in, and then he would turn to uh, a symbol that represented the teaching to him, but more than that, the lineage, the wisdom throughout the ages that had helped him get to where he is, and he would just bow in gratitude to that. And it was almost like, gratitude coming in and then gratitude flowing back out. And there was something really beautiful to that, because as you say, there can be a separate self that wants to own that stuff, and to just pass it on immediately in the moment is like it allows that humility and that it allows the humility to stay, I suppose.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, the insurance policy against pride or arrogance is always not knowing anything, not holding on to anything, and
Mm.
like the Buddha here and the Om are reminders for me, and well, all over my house, reminders of the one
Mm.
infinite power that is really the cause of all of this, that it's never a separate
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
And the Buddha statue itself doesn't represent one guy, Siddhartha Gautama, thousands of years ago. It represents the allness of it, the totality appearing as the individual. So, like we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, and that's the best place, the only place to hang out from, where you can't really get caught.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So I'm aware of time, and I kind of want to start wrapping things up. But there is one question I wanted to put to you around it, we are all this infinite self, really. And um we can self-inquire to find that in our own experience. But for me, when I self-inquire, I'm trying to be careful with my language here, because awareness is always there, right?
Yeah, don't worry about
Awareness
it.
is always
We've got to use dualistic
awareness is
words.
yeah, awareness is always there. But that feeling, that sense of how much my attention is back or out varies. And when I self-inquire by myself, I'll find some space and some peace, and it'll be nice. When I self-inquire with a realized being like yourself, like today, just earlier, it's much more profound, it's much more spacious. So it feels to me like there's something going on between us, that there's some kind of energy exchange or some kind of phenomenon in consciousness that allows me to tune in more, allows me to find more of that space. And I'm curious as to your take on that. What is happening there when I'm self-inquiring alone or self-inquiring with you?
Very good question. So there's an awakened being's aura, energy, whatever you want to call that, is very open. It's not asking anything of us, and we're always in energetic communication as well as verbal. The energetic communication is going on between us, everyone, everywhere, all the time. And the awakened being is not asking, I don't need you to like me. I don't need this to be successful, this podcast. I don't need you to approve of me or anything like that. And while we're together, you don't need me to like you either. It's just kind of obvious that it's really beautiful to be together like that. There's no separateness in, if you make me feel important as a teacher, I'll give you some really good stuff. None of that's going on. It's just all this thing.
Yes.
But it's not something an awakened being is doing to someone else, a student. It's more like, while you're hanging out in that energy, you just can't do the normal things you do. You're not self-inquiring then to try to get to some end goal where you feel something. There's just inquiry, with no motivation behind it to get somewhere, you could say. Because in that kind of high openness of fullness and richness that comes with realization, when you're hanging around that kind of energy, it's really only activating the same thing within your own self, isn't it? Your own individual self.
Yes.
So that's why it feels so perhaps much more peaceful and also much more profound, the seeings. But the awakened being is only your own self. So challenging that idea that I can't feel the same way, can't see the same depth in my inquiry when I'm doing it on my own. I had to really, really challenge that idea.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time today. Yeah.
It's been wonderful, wonderful. So enjoyable too, and very insightful questions. Very open questions. Beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
look forward to seeing you again soon in one of your satsangs.
Yeah, beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.